Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to today's live stream. Um, my name is Axel from Get Speaking English. And today we're going to be talking about relationships. So, welcome. Welcome if this is your first time here. Welcome back if you've been here before. Also, hello if you are watching this afterwards on YouTube, since I've been putting all of these videos up on YouTube. Yeah. As a lot of you know, for the past couple of weeks, I have been talking about relationships, and I have been sharing all sorts of posts related to this topic through my social media. So if you're looking for more information about this topic, if it's something that really interests you, be sure to check out my Instagram, Facebook, my Telegram accounts, the YouTube as well. There are lots of posts related to this where you can find vocabulary, things to read with some vocabulary in context. Also videos, speaking prompts, so you could get speaking about this topic as well. Just lots of things there, so you can get some practice really talking about this topic in depth. And hopefully, a lot of that language will also be useful for your exams, since I know that a lot of my followers are preparing for exams. So, this class in particular is going to be aimed at preparing students for the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. However, a lot of this language, a lot of the things we'll be talking about will also be useful for an exam like IELTS, TOEFL, for example. Also, any sort of general English exam for students at an upper intermediate to an advanced level. So it's all going to be relevant there. Then I'm just going to fix my screen, maybe really, really quickly, if I can. Um, yeah. So all of that will be helpful. Okay, there we go. I checked everything beforehand. But of course, stuff always happens last minute because that is how streaming seems to go. Anyways, yeah. So anybody who's looking to do an advanced level exam, this information will be useful for you. Or if you're just looking to speak English at an upper intermediate to an advanced level, all of that's going to be relevant and useful to you. So, yeah. So, I do have the chat up. I can see the chat, so feel free to say hello if you would like. And as we go through too, feel free to throw out your own ideas. What I'm going to do is I have our notes here. I'm going to go through the material. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to throw out any vocabulary and ideas I think are interesting and relevant to these topics and to these questions. But also, you can throw out your ideas as well. And what I'll do is I will compile all of our notes together afterwards, and I will put them into a PDF and upload them. So you will have access to those notes along with this video afterwards, and you can use it for a reference for studying later. All right. So today I thought we're going to do a warm up, and we're going to be talking about conflict resolution today. So, conflict resolution. So our warm up is going to be about that specifically. Then we're going to brainstorm some. Actually, we're not going to brainstorm any questions, but we're going to discuss some questions similar to the ones that you might find on part 4 of the speaking paper of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So we'll talk about that part of the exam really quickly and then look at some questions in a style that are similar to ones that you might find. And then afterwards, as usual, like I said, I'm going to compile our notes. I'm going to put everything together. I will get this video ready to go, and then I will put everything up on YouTube so you can check it out later and have that as a reference. All right, perfect. So we're going to look at this infographic. So what I was thinking about what to do. I Googled basically I basically Googled conflict resolution, and this was one of the infographics that kind of caught my eye. And I think that we can potentially talk about it. And in the notes as well, I will put a link to where I got this graphic from, so you can check it out where it comes from. But according to the author, these are sort of different things that you can do to resolve conflicts, okay? So these are potential methods of conflict resolution. Let's see if I can get my pen. There we go. Yes, okay. Yeah, so here are some different things that you can do to resolve a conflict. And according to the author, some of these are things that you should do, some of these are things that you should not do. And then also maybe potential things to consider, to try, and things that maybe you should rethink about because maybe they're not so good. So I think we should I want to go through each of these, talk about it a little bit, what it is, what it means, and let's also try to hypothesize why this person has chosen to categorize each method in this way. Because I find some of this is a little bit interesting, kind of might have something interesting to talk about. So, and I encourage you to talk about this as well, too. Afterwards, after this lesson, maybe you have a friend, somebody you can practice your speaking with, and you guys can discuss the information on here as well. So, yeah. So, the do's and don'ts of conflict resolution, right? So let's go through, let's talk about what these are and why this person maybe has put these things, how they are put. So the first thing here, we have confronting. So confronting, which basically means to confront someone. And what does that mean? It means that you basically if you confront a problem, you deal with it head on. So if you confront somebody, you basically go to them and tell them your problem. You tell them about the problem to their face. So it's a very direct form of conflict resolution, right? Yeah. So you would then, discuss those concerns sort of like openly, I guess. But I find it interesting, though, that they do have this under, like, sort of, it's a thing that you should absolutely do, right? Because I think some people are worried that, if you confront somebody about something, you may come off as being rude or impolite, right? So that may be kind of frowned upon in maybe some cultures, some societies, right? Depending on the situation. So it's interesting here that they actually say that you should do that. Absolutely, you should absolutely do that. So I suppose the reason that maybe they have put it here is because, it's good to address problems head on. So we talk about addressing problems head on. That means that you deal with them directly without hiding anything, right? Or without, what we might say, beating around the bush, which is kind of a funny idiom to say to, if you beat around the bush about something, maybe you hint at something or you talk about something in a very indirect way, which is not very, it's the opposite of directing something, about approaching something head on, right? So yeah, so they're saying that, it's hard to resolve conflict if we are beating around the bush and if we are hiding our true feelings about things, or maybe we're speaking indirectly. So it's better to be very open, very direct about things. So yeah, so great little idiom there. Then we also have over here, we have avoiding. So, and what does it mean to avoid? So if you avoid something, this basically means, well, to avoid something essentially means you don't come in contact with it, right? So, and in this case, when we're talking about, conflict resolution and things like that, you don't bring it up because you don't want to create conflict, right? So we're essentially, we sidestep the issues, or we beat around the bush, like we just said earlier. So sidestep, just another way to say that we kind of avoid talking about those issues head on. And that maybe you pretend that the conflict doesn't even exist, right? And it can be really challenging to come to an agreement about something with when somebody does not want to talk about something, or if they, refuse to acknowledge something, right? So I think it makes sense that this would be in the don't category, right? We absolutely don't want to pretend. We don't want to say that things don't exist when they're there. It's much better to be direct and talk about things head on. They also have forcing here as well underneath the don't category. And what does forcing mean? If you force somebody to do something, you make them do something that they don't want to do. You make them do something against their will. So, they want to do one thing, but no, you make them do something else that they want to do. So, yeah, so maybe in this case, maybe you will have your solution and you will just force that person to accept your solution, right? So, maybe also too, if we kind of are trying to force someone to do something, we might make threats, right? So that would be really bad. That's being very a very aggressive way to deal with a conflict, not really good. Maybe also, this might also maybe some sort of form of manipulation. Maybe. And so what does manipulation mean? Or, so manipulation, this is going to be the noun. To manipulate is the verb. And that just basically means that you try to say or do things in order to control another person. Right? So, and it's very it's a very negative thing. We don't want to manipulate people. We don't want to use manipulation tactics to force them into doing something they don't want to do. So that is not a good way to problem solve, right? It's really bad. If we do this, it might, the person might feel resentment, which is not a good thing. And what is resentment? Resentment is this feeling of anger that you get when you've been forced to do something you don't want to do. So the feeling of anger that you get because you've been forced to do something you don't want to do. So if we're forcing people to do things they don't want to do, they will feel resentment. They will maybe end up resenting us or the situation, which is not good, right? So I think that's logical why that would be like a don't. Then we have compromising. So we have compromising. And we have it in the think again category, which I thought was kind of interesting. And compromising, well, to compromise kind of means to give something, give away something. Both parties typically give away something in order to find some middle ground, right? So basically, to give up something you want so you can come to an agreement, basically. Right, if you would do this to find middle ground. And just another way to say to come to an agreement, to kind of like both parties sort of like come, one person maybe like sort of gives up something, the other person gives something up as well, and then you meet in the middle somewhere. So that's what it means to find common ground, maybe. Yeah, it's basically, or actually, yeah, you would do this to find common ground. Common ground could also mean to talk about things that you maybe have in common that you both want, and to focus on that as well. But yeah, so these are all sort of important ideas related to compromising, right? Yeah. So, but it's interesting though that they have this in here into the think again sort of category. I thought that was kind of interesting because I think that when we talk about problem solving, compromising often comes up as a positive thing, right? It's like, well, you try to like give up both things while you're negotiating and you meet in the middle somewhere, right? But this person is saying that maybe that's not necessarily the best idea. So I wonder, like, let's maybe hypothesize why this might not be the best idea. And feel free to throw out your ideas as well. I'm thinking that maybe they're just worried that some people may not, one party may give up too much and not have their needs met. And this is kind of an interesting sort of collocation that comes up when talking about relationship and things like that. So, and when you have your needs met, you basically get the things that you truly want, right? So you get the things that you truly need. So yeah, so maybe, if one person is a little bit more passive, maybe there's a risk that they will end up being unhappy in the end. I don't know. Or maybe one party tends to not compromise as much because they're a little bit more selfish. I have no idea. But yeah, if you have any thoughts about this, feel free to put it in the chat and think about this as well. Like, would you put this underneath this category if you were creating this infographic? What do you say? Then we also have accommodating, which is underneath the this try category. So, and to accommodate something, it's kind of like it's sort of similar to compromising, but it's a little bit more like if you make accommodations for somebody, that maybe they have an issue or something, and then maybe you would give them something to satisfy that need so they can be a little bit more comfortable. So, this might involve one party maybe yielding something they want to the other, party's needs, maybe. And if we yield something, that means it's just kind of a fancy way to say to give something. I mean, that could potentially be something. But I think you would try to maybe, it's more about like giving something. You would maybe give this person, try to give something to make them feel a bit happier. So, you know, do you guys like would you agree with this? You not agree with this? I don't know. I suppose I could see that this is, if accommodating is from the position of giving something and compromising is from the position of having to give up something, then I could see maybe why this would be maybe better to do compared to this compromising. So, you know, so because when we're accommodating, maybe we're not necessarily giving up something that we want, but I don't know. Anyways, let me know what you think. And then finally, we have here collaborating. So collaborating, this idea of working together, right? Which I think we could all agree is probably the ideal situation, an ideal situation when it comes to problem solving. You want to work together, right? To reach sort of like an agreement together, right? It usually involves maybe active and open communication, right? Like active listening, all those sort of things, right? So, and that's definitely underneath, I guess, the do category. Looks like it's partly like a to do slash a try. So, yeah. So, lots of things to consider on this little infographic when it comes to conflict resolution. So, I would definitely, recommend that you take some time to check out this, talk about it as well, think, hypothesize about what you think these different categories mean, and do you agree with them? Are there situations where some of these things would work, some of these things wouldn't work? You could also check out the website where I got this from. I will leave the link in the notes, but you could definitely check that out as well and see what the author actually wrote about, so you can learn a lot of other different words and phrases related to this topic. So that would be really good for you to do as well. All right, perfect. So now that we're thinking about conflict resolution, let's talk a little bit about speaking part 4, and then we'll look at some questions kind of about this. So just a really quick overview, if this is your first time hearing about the B2 First and the C1 Advanced exam, it's actually taken, when you do the exam, you do it with another candidate. So there'll be 2 candidates in the room at the same time. Sometimes there are 3, but there's usually only 2. There's 2 examiners. You're going to be talking to 1 examiner, and certain parts of the exam are just like things that you do by yourself that don't involve the other candidate. But part 3, and part 4 are actually discussions between candidates. So this part here, part 4, this is going to be like the last part of the speaking paper. And these are kind of just sort of big picture, abstract questions about everything. Because at this level, at B2, C1, we want to be able to talk about a variety of different topics. So really any topic could come up here. But a lot of these questions are, the questions on this part of the exam will be related to whatever you talked about on part 3 of the exam. And typically what happens here is it's just a conversation. So the examiner may ask one candidate a question, that candidate would answer the question, then the examiner may maybe ask the other candidate the same question, or to sort of get a conversation going, you can always ask your partner their opinion, a question about your question. Like, the idea is to have a conversation. So that's what we want to have. That's what we want to happen here. So, if you're not willing to sort of make that conversation happen, then the examiner might ask the other candidate to chime in on the questions as well. But you can also initiate a conversation here. So you can respond to what your partner said on their questions and vice versa. So we really just want to try to focus on having a good conversation during this part of the exam. Yeah. So, right. So either you or your partner will be asked a question. You should respond, give her opinion, and then consider asking your partner what they think to get that conversation happening. Yeah. So, and you can step in if they happen to not ask you for your opinion or anything like that. So, and then basically you just want to continue having this conversation. We want to make sure that when we are talking about the topic that we are giving new information, we don't want to just be talking about the same thing over and over and over again, right? So we want to always be building, adding on to the conversation, not just repeating things, okay? But really, we just want to be able to continue talking about this question either until we potentially run out of time, but also, if the examiner steps in, they could stop as well. Or you can just talk until you run out of things to say, right? That's naturally happens in a conversation. That's fine. Discuss the question. If it comes to a natural stopping point, that's fine. The examiner will come in and they will have additional questions to ask you. So it's just like a normal conversation. Don't worry about it too much. Everything, it'll be fine. A couple little things to keep in mind, because some people talk too much. This is a conversation, it's not a monologue. So try to keep your contributions short. We don't want to dominate the entire time speaking. But keep them short, keep them relevant. You can also go ahead and you can agree, disagree with your partner. You can ask them questions. You can do different things to sort of guide the conversation, right? And like I said, we always want to be adding, we always want to be building the conversation, giving new ideas and thoughts and things like that. We don't want it to become repetitive, but as long as the conversation is moving and there are sort of new ideas being added, then all of that is fine. So yeah, so like I said, these are kind of sort of big picture, sort of more abstract ideas. What do I mean about that? Sort of, they're sort of about topics that maybe you don't normally think about on a day-to-day basis, right? So when we saw part 1 of the exam, those are sort of easier warm-up questions. Those are questions all about you, your life, things that are relevant to you specifically or your community, those sort of things. But here we're just talking about the world, we're talking about other people, we're not necessarily talking about ourselves here. So that's what I mean by big picture, abstract sort of questions. So here is kind of a good one. So what sort of things typically create conflict within a relationship? And feel free to throw out your ideas. I know I have a couple ideas as well. So what sort of things typically create conflict within a relationship? And in my mind, probably the biggest thing is probably communication issues. I think that's a big one, right? So, right, misunderstandings, poor communication, or poor communication skills, maybe, can create problems, right? Um, maybe one person doesn't speak up enough about what they're thinking, right? So, I mean, that could potentially be something. Maybe they do this because they want to avoid confrontation, right? So, we talked about avoiding before. So, maybe potentially, too, this person wants to avoid confrontation. So, because of that, they choose not to speak up at all when it comes to the things that they want to do. So they just kind of pretend that everything is fine, or maybe they hold it inside and they start to feel resentful. So again, that idea that, your needs aren't met somehow, or you're doing something you don't want to do because you don't speak up. So you would feel resentful, maybe. Right? So that could potentially be something, right? Maybe too, as well, maybe somebody is speaking, maybe they are saying what they want, but the other partner isn't listening. That could be something. Right? We know that communication, it's sort of it's a two-way thing, right? Communication doesn't work unless you have people who are listening to you, right? So that could definitely be something. Or maybe their partner misinterprets what they're saying. And what does it mean to misinterpret something? If you misinterpret something, means that the one person says one thing and then that other person hears what they say and they think they mean something else. So to misinterpret something means to think something means something else. It's like the wrong meaning. So that would definitely be a bad thing, right? But that could potentially happen. Maybe also there's a lack of communication in general, right? So if there's a lack of communication, great collocation, that just means that there's not enough communication. So that could be something as well, right? Maybe partners don't have enough time to talk to one another. That is definitely something that could come up. Yeah, so that could definitely be cause a lot of problems in relationships, right? Potentially also too, maybe people have different communication styles. So what do I mean by that? Communication styles. It's like, well, maybe one person is very direct. We might say they're very, very direct. They tell you what they think. Whereas maybe the other person prefers, giving hints, or they're more subtle in their communication. So if something is subtle, that means that it's not clear or direct, right? They're not very loud, it's not noticeable. So you have to listen more in order to figure out what they want, right? So some people are just like that, right? Which can maybe create some problems sometimes, right? Maybe too, also, maybe a partner withholds information. And what does it mean to withhold something? So if you withhold something, it means that you deliberately keep something from someone else. So in this case, maybe we know something, but we refuse to tell that thing to the other person. So we are withholding information. So that would definitely hinder communication, right? Potentially create a lot of problems. Maybe let's think of another topic. Maybe money issues could be something, right? Maybe partners disagree about how to spend money. Or maybe they have different spending habits. So, how we choose to spend our money, things like that, right? So, one example could be like maybe one partner wants to save money for vacation while the other person might want to spend money on, I don't know, maybe bills or something. But that would create a lot of issues, right? Or maybe they want to spend money on maybe, I don't know, I want to say junk, but like just like different things, like maybe aren't necessities, right? Anyways, whatever. Um, so that could definitely create a lot of problems, right? If your priorities don't align when it comes to spending money. Maybe also income disparities might be something. So a disparity is when there is a gap, when there is a difference between things. So an income disparity, we'll put it into singular. So a disparity gap. So there's a gap between things. So maybe one partner earns a lot of money, the other partner earns a lot less money. Right? So that could definitely create some challenges, right? It can create what we might call an imbalance in the relationship, right? When things are not equal. And it could also create some tension in the relationship. So tension when maybe things aren't that great, maybe some people, so there's some like anger there or something. Not necessarily like they're arguing, but there's definitely some people are unhappy there, or there's something going on there. So that would be tension, right? Another thing as well too is like maybe partners aren't making equal financial contributions, right? So what do I mean by a financial contribution? Well, a contribution is basically something you give to make sure that something is successful, right? So a contribution is something you give to make something kind of successful. So in this case, like the financial contributions could be towards paying the bills, for example, or things like that. So, maybe one person finds themselves paying all the bills, right? So they are contributing to all the bills, all the groceries, things like that, while the other person spends all their money on, I don't know, frivolous items. And what does frivolous mean? Frivolous is a kind of a great word. So frivolous, something silly, not useful. So yeah, so maybe they spend all of their items on frivolous things, on non-essential items, right? Maybe they have their spending is a little out of control. So this could definitely create some problems in a relationship, right? Maybe debt as well, right? Also create a strain on the relationship. So, right? Nowadays, I think it's pretty common for people to have lots of debt, right? I'm sure we could think of some other ideas as well, right? Maybe also just like habits, personal habits or behavior issues, you know. Sometimes it's common to move in with somebody and then find out that you have routines and things that are not compatible. So that could definitely be a problem, right? So, you know, differences in lifestyle choices or habits or routines, I think, can be a problem, right? So definitely, right? Maybe, for example, or maybe two, just if we're talking about behavior, you know, maybe one person is always is very punctual, which means to be on time, while the other person is maybe chronically late. So if you're chronically something, it means you're always something. So maybe they're chronically late, definitely. That could definitely be a problem, right? Or maybe one person prefers to get up really early, the other person prefers to sleep in late, those sort of things. So lots of little issues there, right? You could also maybe talk about, you know, jealousy or trust. Maybe like external stressors as well, right? Like a new job, moving, kids. I mean, there's all sorts of things we could potentially talk about here. So, yeah, so lots of things that could create conflict within a relationship, right? So, now let's think about maybe the ways we could solve some of these problems. So, how can some of the problems previously mentioned be solved? So, how can some of them be solved? So, let's think maybe a couple of them. Let's think about the communication ones first. Feel free to add your ideas as well. I will put them, I'll put your ideas in my notes as well. One thing that I hear come up is the idea of scheduling a date night. And you're like, what is that? It's like when if you go on a date, right, you set time to do something with your partner, right? So maybe you go out for dinner, maybe you watch a movie, maybe you just spend the night in. But basically, you schedule some time where both of you can just sit down, relax, get to know each other, right? And that can give you it can give partners an opportunity to connect and talk with one another. And so that can help alleviate issues with communication, right? Maybe also therapy is an idea. So maybe you could have some therapy sessions. So, and what is therapy? There's sort of these times you would meet with a therapist, which is basically a trained professional, sort of like a doctor, but there's somebody who knows how to work through issues, communication challenges, those sort of things, right? So maybe you would work with a therapist, you would go to therapy. You would meet with this therapist, and usually during a therapy session, they create a safe space where where people can express their needs. So a safe space, a place where we know we can be vulnerable, say things without worrying, right? Where we can express our needs, say what we want, right? So, that's definitely, right? That would definitely be a very good way to overcome communication issues, right? Because a lot of people feel that during a therapy session, they feel safe enough, they can express their needs, have their concerns heard by their partner. And also, too, a lot of times, they use active listening techniques during these sessions. And, what is that? We might paraphrase, summarize what the partner says, right? So, active listening techniques can be really crucial to resolving communication issues, right? So, we can demonstrate that we've heard what our partner says and that we understand them, right? How about money issues? Since we talked about money issues as well, right? And I think here communication could just basically play a role, right? So, for example, just being honest about spending, being transparent. You'll hear that come up a lot when it comes to these sort of things. So, being transparent, just another way to say, to be really honest, to be really open about something, right? It's important to be honest about the financial situation and any concerns, right? Also, too, right? You could spend time, you could establish some financial goals together. So here, and establish, just another sort of a fancier way to say to create some goals, right? But you outline the goals, you decide them, so you can establish those goals together, so you could work together to create maybe both short-term and long-term goals, right? So anything short-term within the immediate future, long-term, talking maybe years into the future, right? They're both very valid. They're both very important when it comes to talking about money and those kind of goals, right? So maybe they can, for example, decide on strategies to pay off debt. Maybe that's an example of a long-term goal, or saving for a house, right? Planning retirement. These are all pretty big long-term goals, especially retirement, but maybe also planning for vacation. Could be maybe more of a short-term goal, right? Yeah. And maybe also, too, they could create a budget together. So a budget is sort of a sheet, tells you what you're going to, what money is coming in, and then how you're going to spend that money, right? So you could create a budget. They could pool their resources together. So if you pool your resources together, that basically means that you put your resources together. And what resources do I mean here? I mean the money, our money. So we're going to pool our financial resources together and then decide how to allocate that money into the different areas of the budget. And what does it mean to allocate money? We'll talk about allocating money, or allocate spending. basically means to decide or determine how something will be used for a specific purpose. So if you allocate something, especially money, means to decide how to use something. Or yeah, to decide, how about this, how something will be used for a specific purpose. So we're not just spending on anything or everything, but we have specific goals in mind, so we're going to put specific pools of money towards that. Yeah, so that's what it means to allocate money or resources. And I know too, we talked about, right, personal habits as well. Personal habits or behavior issues, right? Maybe here we could do some therapy again, right? So that could definitely be something. Or again, the communication could come back here, right? You know, just be clear and direct about problems and try to come to solutions. You know, don't sweep anything under the rug. So another great idiom here. What does it mean to sweep something under the rug? Again, a way to say that you ignore something, you pretend it doesn't exist. Right? So instead we want to be honest that maybe there's an issue here and then try to maybe set some boundaries, right? I mean, that could be something, you know, be honest about what your limits are and then find a way to respectfully find a solution to those issues, right? So lots of different things that you could potentially do. And feel free to talk about this as well, right? So lots to say about this topic, right? So feel free to grab a partner and talk about it, right? But yeah, definitely some interesting ideas, things that you can consider when thinking about these topics, right? So yeah. Anyways, so like I said, I am going to go ahead and I will upload this video to YouTube. I'll put our notes together so you will have these as a resource. Thanks again for coming. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned too, there's a lot of other resources related to this topic all over social media, so feel free to check that out as well. This is our last live lesson about relationships, and I'm going to be wrapping up that unit really shortly. The next topic is going to be sustainability, which should be kind of an interesting one. So, potentially talking about environmental sustainability, but sustainability also covers a lot of other interesting topics as well. So that should be something interesting to talk about. So I will be sharing lots of posts about sustainability coming up after I wrap up everything with relationships. So yeah, and I am not ready to release the live stream schedule yet, so I'm still trying to figure that out, but we'll definitely have this topic coming up, so it should be an interesting one. Anyways, thanks again for coming out, and I hope that I will talk to you shortly. All right, bye.